Now you'll notice when you place your cursor in that rainbow, a little pop-up appears, and it probably says something like CMYK spectrum. So we have two different color modes, and one of those is called CMYK, as you just saw a minute ago. And then the other one is called RGB, which we haven't seen just yet. CMYK is typically for printing purposes, and it stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and then black. They actually fool you on the last one. Okay, CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and then black. And that's for printing purposes. RGB stands for red, green, and blue. And we usually use this for web purposes, mobile environment, anything that's going to be digital and we don't anticipate printing. So by default, since we selected a letter size document, InDesign assumes that we're going to be printing that file, and therefore the default of the color mode that it uses is CMYK. Now we do have the ability to change that however we want to. But you'll notice over here in the color panel, we have CMYK. The values are in percentages, 0 to 100%. If, however, we wanted to work in RGB, we'd click on this menu button, simply choose RGB from the list. The values now for RGB are numeric numbers from 0 to 255. So if I simply place my cursor down here, notice it now says RGB spectrum. When I select a color, the values appear. You'll also see a 6-digit number or 6-character number. This is called the hexadecimal number. And the first two items represent the color red, the second two green, and then the last two blue, so RGB. When you see this little swatch over here on the left-hand side and it has a yield sign, it says it's out of gamut if you place your cursor on the yield sign. If you place your cursor on the actual swatch color, notice it says in gamut. So if you pay attention to these slider positions and the numbers that are being displayed, 47, 223, and 0, when I click on this little swatch, notice the values have changed. It's now 91, 186, and 71. So what it's done is it gave me the closest printable green color to the color that I had selected. Because when you're dealing with these two different color modes, not all RGB colors can be physically printed, typically because they're too bright. Notice when I select a really bright green, this is what it looks like as to what I selected. Notice how this option is much darker in color. So this is an RGB color, but because I'm viewing it only on a computer screen, that color can be displayed much brighter than can what physically be printed. And this color they're providing me is the closest printable color to the green that I had selected. Now, you'll notice that these numbers or characters here are not consistent. In other words, only one of them is an identical pair. We've got 72, BF, and then 44. So the 44 is the only identical pair. When these numbers are the exact same pair, so for example, maybe the first two are 00, the next two is something like AA, and then the last two are 44. Now I have what's called a web safe color. And notice the values of those numbers change as well, and the position on the sliders changes. Web safe colors always have identical pair combinations. Doesn't mean that every number has to be the same or every letter has to be the same, just each pair. So 00, AA, 44, that's a web safe color. That means that that color should look consistent across all computer screens. If a color is not web safe, it's still a color that can be seen on a computer screen. It's just there's going to be a slight variance in what that color looks like on a Mac screen, a PC screen, etc. So those are things to keep in mind. You'll also notice in this color palette, we have these two buttons right here. One looks like a square, the other one looks like a letter T. And so if I click on the word Mississippi, when you're dealing with objects and text in InDesign, you actually have two pieces. You have the frame and then whatever is inside of that frame. So specifically with a text frame, of course, I have the box, which is the frame, and then I have the text that's inside of that frame. And when I go to my color palette, if this first button is selected and I choose a color, it applies it to the frame area. If I click on the letter T and change the value, it changes the color of the text. Now, this letter T that you're seeing here that I'm circling actually stands for tint. Doesn't stand for type, stands for tint, which in this case is the addition of white. Okay, and by default, when text is selected, because the default color is going to be black, you're going to get this tint slider, which allows you to then make it lighter or all the way back to white. If you want to apply an actual color, you're going to go to that panel menu. You're going to choose the color combination that you want. And then you can adjust the sliders, type in whatever values you want, etc.